It is the day before. 49ers Vikings kickoff tomorrow. We've got an intel session. I think I have a lot of content for you in the what's it going to be? Let's do the math right now. It is 9:23 a.m. on the Pacific Coast. I fly to Minneapolis tomorrow, and the game is at about 5 or 5:15 Pacific time, right? Not till 7 Central time. So 24 hours from now, we'll be looking at Monday morning. It'll be 9:23 Monday morning, and we'll still have 3 plus 5, 8, about 8 hours of Monday morning waiting time. So 8 hours plus 24. We're about 32 hours away from 49ers Vikings kickoff. So I'll take you from here to there. I'll be flying to Minneapolis in between, and I'll also be taking you the final 37 minutes right now before the 10 a.m. Pacific time kickoffs in the NFL. It's that rare chance to get to watch the entire league while your own team is getting ready to play on Monday night. So good chance right now to examine the NFL. If you're the 49ers, we can take a look at the Sunday slate. But first, we're going to be talking about the 49ers and their health situation and some of the data, some of the intel looking into this Vikings football game. I got my coffee just down the street. It was a later night last night. Checked out the Stanford game. Went to see my old student radio station. Stanford is terrible this year. But they beat Colorado. They came from down 29-0 a week ago. Yesterday, there was no comeback in the cards against Chip Kelly, former 49ers coach Chip Kelly, and UCLA. So anyway, a little bit of the coffee, maybe a little bit of water in a little bit, and we'll be off. 49ers intel the day before. McCaffrey, questionable, but I think all signs point toward him playing for the 49ers. Deebo Samuel is not going to play in this football game. Those of you who somehow missed yesterday's news, Deebo Samuel has a hairline fracture in his shoulder. It was not discovered on X-ray. It was not discovered on MRI. And then it still hurt. So the 49ers said, get a CT scan. The CT scan found the hairline fracture in Deebo Samuel's shoulder. It's not a long-term injury. 49ers aren't considering injured reserve right now. They have a very well-positioned bye week in 2 games right after they play Cincinnati next Sunday. So they think that Deebo Samuel might be able to return after that bye on November 12th at Jacksonville. For now, as long as they have one of the two, McCaffrey or Samuel, I don't think that the offensive playbook will be significantly compromised because they're complementary skill sets. Now, we're not sure if they're going to have McCaffrey on Monday, but we think that they will. He's officially questionable, but I do think that all signs point toward him playing. Christian McCaffrey yesterday said that he feels great. That was his quote. He said it like 8 or 9 times. I feel great. I feel great. I feel great. He's obviously playing it close to the vest. He doesn't want to reveal where exactly the oblique injury is, so he doesn't give opponents the advantage of trying to target it on the field. Speaking of that, Christian McCaffrey has already generated a massive amount of fines this year. Zadarius Smith got fined about $12,000 for his early face mask on Christian against the Browns last week. That was almost exactly a week ago at this time. We were gearing up. We're in final warm-ups for 49ers Browns. They're fighting around this time last week. Anyway, $12,000 for Zadarius Smith. The total now runs to $86,474 in total fines combined for penalties against Christian McCaffrey. Not penalties assessed against Christian McCaffrey, but plays, unnecessary roughness that was flagged on players who were facing Christian McCaffrey. They have now been fined a total of $86,474. A player that I do not think is going to play tomorrow is Trent Williams. And it just so happens that I believe this was the play on which Trent Williams got hurt. I can't be sure, but I think that's the play where he got his ankle rolled up on just by accident. It's in the background of that picture right there. I don't think that Trent's going to play in this football game. And I think that the 49ers in this game are going to have to make it work against this Minnesota blitz and against Danielle Hunter, who is leading the NFL in sacks with 8 sacks. I think they're going to have to make it work without Trent Williams. He's officially doubtful. He didn't practice all week. I barely saw him in the locker room. very briefly. And I know what happened last week against the Browns. Trent tried to stayed in the game against Myles Garrett, who's one of the best in the game. And it was a otherworldly Browns defense. I think we should establish that. And the fact that that happened last week meant that Trent Williams did not look good. He gave up a lot of pressure. The pocket was just caving in on the 49ers. I think I have an illustration for that, by the way. Look at this. This was last week. This is the average distance from the quarterback at the time of release for the Browns. The average distance in the league for a league average rusher is this bolded arc, which is 4.56 yards. As you can see, every single one of the Browns' primary pass rushers was significantly closer to Brock Purdy at the time of release than the league average, especially Myles Garrett, who had the shortest distance of all, 3.27 yards. And Myles Garrett was working against Trent Williams. So it wasn't a good day for Trent. He tried to go so he wouldn't expose Jalen Moore, but I think it's time to make sure that Trent Williams and his big 320-pound frame on that injured ankle, I think it's time to make sure that he gets back to a full health so he can be fully effective against some of these really good edge rushers. And one of the really good edge rushers in the NFL is Danielle Hunter. Leads the league with 8 sacks. Danielle's going to line up against both sides. He actually primarily likes the right side against Colton McKivitz. But I think since it's probably going to be Jalen Moore starting for the 49ers on the left, you'll see Danielle maybe try his hand even a little bit more often against that left side. So the 49ers have to take on that, Danielle Hunter, with those league-leading 8 sacks, while they try to figure out Minnesota's blitz. The blitz is the highest rate in the NFL. Amoeba fronts, so the rate is 33.7%, which is really, really damn high. Get that up on the screen for you. That's from True Media. But an amoeba front means you don't know who's going to be coming and who's not. Now, there's a good chance that Danielle Hunter is going to be coming on every single play, right? Because Danielle Hunter is one of the leading edge rushers in the league, actually has that number 1 spot in sacks. So he's one of the 4 down that is coming after you. So you have to account for him. But accounting for the other players who might be coming is going to be more difficult for the 49ers. Is Harrison Smith, the safety, going to come crashing down on a blitz? Jordan Hicks, one of the linebackers, you have to account for him. There's going to be a mad scramble in front of a lot of these plays to determine who you have to pick up, whose assignment is whose, right? And that, to me, is the biggest danger point in this game for the 49ers, especially because it comes on the road. You look at crowd noise. You look at the fact that Brian Flores has flummoxed the 49ers before. The nonverbal communication is going to have to be really good for the 49ers up front. And that's not just from Brock Purdy. That's from the center, Jake Brendel. Brian Flores was the coach of the Dolphins in 2020. I've talked about this game a lot. It was a disaster on the 49ers side. They were not able to handle the gap pressure. They had big center issues back then. So the 49ers are going to have to be much, much better with that in this football game. I think the screen game both ways might be what determines 49ers Vikings, because the 49ers, last time they saw a heavy blitz rate was against the New York Giants in week 3. That was 85%. It was the highest blitz rate on record from NFL Next Gen Stats. The very next week, the Vikings played, and they delivered the second highest blitz rate on record. Teams have loved to blitz Brock Purdy. Why have they loved to blitz Brock Purdy? Well, this right here might give you a little bit of an idea as to why. It's not a awesome reason as to why to blitz Brock Purdy, but it's better than nothing. This is his performance against the blitz and against no blitz, both last year and this year. In 2022, his yards per attempt against the blitz, 7.1. His yards per attempt against no blitz, 9. His rating against the blitz, 97.8. His rating against no blitz, 113.1. So it got better, right? Here in 2023, his yards per attempt against the blitz, 7. So about the same as last year. His rating, against the blitz, a little bit better, 101.6. His yards per attempt against no blitz, nearly 10, 9.8. His rating against no blitz, 119.6. Essentially, Purdy's been good across the entire board, as you can see here, but he's been slightly better when not facing a blitz. So naturally, opponents have decided we're going to blitz Brock Purdy a lot, and the 49ers are the second most blitzed team in football. Teams are trying whatever they can to make Brock Purdy look human. Last week, I think, was an exception. We saw, obviously, we saw the rain, we saw the wet weather, but we saw historically good Cleveland Browns defense. I mean, to the point where it's you could safely say that the 49ers are not going to face another defense like last week's again. Here are the Browns way over on the right side. The Vikings, well, they're as mediocre as they come. They're clumped in with a bunch of other teams, including the Eagles, interestingly, right in the middle of this graph. This is pass and run defense, by the way. Quick tangent. X-axis is going to show where you are against the pass. The 49ers are the number 2 defense in the league against the pass. Y-axis is going to show where you're at against the run. 49ers are below average against the run, so they have to fix that. Minnesota, they're average in both cases. But back to the fact that Minnesota blitzes 33% of the time. The screen game is absolutely going to be vital for both teams. The last time the 49ers faced that insane blitz for the New York Giants, they reverted to quick screen passes. And Christian McCaffrey is a blitz beater in that he's an expert at positioning himself on the screen and then finding a way to use his blockers and squeeze through for open space. We saw it last week with his screen pass early in the game, shovel pass from Brock Purdy that turned into the 49ers' first touchdown against the Cleveland Browns. So the screen game for the 49ers should be huge because I do not expect Minnesota to subside its blitzing strategies all too much. I think that Brock Purdy, again, he's been less efficient against the blitz. Been good, but Minnesota will do whatever they can to create some havoc on Monday night. Screen game is going to be big that way. And if you go back the other way, if you go back to the 49ers defense and their struggles against the run, they've not only struggled against the run, they've struggled against some short passes. They've been really good against longer passes, against intermediate passes, but they've struggled in the screen game, which is essentially an extension of the run game. It's a way to diffuse an over-aggressive pass rush. The 49ers have been emphasizing how they defend traps this week because the traps got them in the run game and how they defend screen passes this week. So both ways, screen passes, I think, are going to determine this game. The success running them and the success defending them is going to be absolutely huge. Then we talk about Brock Purdy's bounce back effort. Well, I think Brock Purdy's consistency makes a bounce back all the more likely. This is NFL efficiency against different coverages. Blue is good, so darker blue is better. Red is bad, so darker red is worse. And gray is relatively average. Look at Brock Purdy against cover 0, cover 1, cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6, and cover 2 man. There is a whole lot of blue. That's Brock Purdy. My cursor's above him. There's a whole lot of blue across the way. For comparison, look at Kirk Cousins across the board. My cursor's down here. That's Kirk Cousins. Blue, red, pretty dark red, dark blue. And then he's had some success against cover 2 man. But there are holes in Kirk Cousins' statistical profile. There are not holes in Brock Purdy's statistical profile. There is no clear set defense to use against Brock Purdy and say this is going to take away his efficiency. Whereas Kirk Cousins has really struggled against cover 1 man. That means bringing a safety down into the box, taking away the run game. The Vikings can't really run the football, and then manning everybody up. Cousins has struggled there. Cousins has struggled against cover 3 zone. Cousins has even struggled against cover 4. His biggest success has come against cover 6, which is a very, very, just softer zone coverage. So between this Brock Purdy's statistical profile, his consistency against different coverages, and this, the fact that he's been consistent against blitz and no blitz, I think we could confidently say that there's Kezar Stadium. That was an accident. I'm looking for, there we go. We can confidently say that this, the Cleveland Browns defense, which is just an outlier in how good it was, is something that will be an outlier on Brock Purdy's resume. His bounce back is made so much more likely through the fact that he's been consistently good, and his one game of struggles came against a outlying defense. Look how far out the Browns are versus everybody else. Now, you guys might have seen one of the other graphics I put up there. We got to talk about the Vikings. How have they been unlucky? The Vikings are at the very bottom here. So I'm going to take off the unlucky text just so you can see. Minnesota's at the very bottom. Total win probability added. Minnesota's had it the least, 133.5% in the negative. Every single part of this, dropped interceptions, dropped by opponent, dropped passes, dropped by opponent, field goals and extra point attempts attempted by the opponent, and fumble recoveries from the other team. Every single part of this, Minnesota has been unlucky. They've lost win probability. They've lost 9 fumbles. Now, part of that's their own doing, but data tells us that fumble luck often regresses to the mean. Goes back to the average over a longer period of time. So can the 49ers count on some more bad luck for Minnesota? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe this stretch will continue, maybe it won't, but it's something worth keeping in mind that they've significantly ranked last in this regard. The 49ers, they haven't been all too lucky either. They've lost a little bit more win probability here. I'll zoom out so you can see. 49ers right here, minus 15.8%. 49ers have been good in terms of fumble recoveries. They've gotten some luck there, plus 11.3%. But the field goal luck hasn't been great yet for the 49ers. And obviously they lost a game with Jake Moody's kick last year. And then everything else has been relatively even. So worth looking at Minnesota's luck or lack thereof in this football game. Shanahan and Kirk Cousins. Why don't we talk about these two guys? So I guess Kyle Shanahan said the other day that in the 2012 draft with Washington ended up picking Kirk in the 4th round. But Kyle thought that Cousins was the second best prospect in that entire draft behind only Andrew Luck. Luck went number 1. RG3 went number 2. It very clearly was not the preference of Mike or Kyle Shanahan to draft RG3 that season. But I guess it was imposed by the front office. Whatever happened in Washington happened. Obviously, they were adamant about taking 2 quarterbacks that year. Kyle, because he thought that Kirk Cousins was the second best QB in that draft, wanted to take Kirk really high up, wanted to take him in the 2nd round with Washington's 2nd pick. But Kirk was still on the board by the 4th round. And Mike Shanahan said, okay, let's pick him now. You like this guy? Let's get him now. So this affinity between Kyle Shanahan and Kirk Cousins, or at least a one-way affinity from Kyle Shanahan toward Kirk Cousins, goes back to that 2012 draft. And I think Shanahan's evaluation was decent in this point. Kirk Cousins has been a solid NFL quarterback, but there has been that missing piece to his game. And it has been performance in primetime games, performance in the playoffs, that little extra oomph that you'll sometimes need from the quarterback position. Kirk had some really efficient years late in Washington and then especially early on in Minnesota. This is not one of those years. Kirk is down at number 16 in expected points added per play, around there in DVOA. He's number 2 in passing yardage, but there's been a lot of garbage yardage for Kirk Cousins. A lot of the reasons behind the fact that he's only 7-11 in prime time and has struggled in the postseason have shown up on the stat sheet this year. It's hard to be number 2 in passing yardage, but number 16 in efficiency. But you get there because you're not good on 3rd down, because you're not good in the red zone, because you're throwing a little short of the sticks on some of those key 3rd downs, right? That kind of stuff has happened for Minnesota. And I think it's happened because Kirk Cousins has not had a great platform to succeed. Minnesota has a poor run game. They're number 25 in expected points added per play. No more Dalvin Cook. They've got Alexander Madison in there. He's the lead back for Minnesota. They have Cam Akers, the former Ram, after the trade. They haven't been able to generate much of a run game with either of those two backs. And they have a decent offensive line in Minnesota. Now, they're not going to have Ezra Cleveland in this game, right? So no Ezra Cleveland. He's the starting left guard. He can move. He can really move. So that puts a weakness at left guard, and that puts a weakness at right guard that already existed with Ed Ingram. Ed Ingram, the right guard, has been Minnesota's worst pass protector so far this year. I think this can be a Javon Hargrave type of game for the 49ers because it's always a Javon Hargrave game. He's always going to have a big impact with how good of a pass rusher he is in the middle. But here in particular, with Minnesota missing their starting left guard, Ezra Cleveland, who, by the way, don't be surprised if the 49ers are interested in picking him up some way because Ezra Cleveland is a very athletic player that I think would fit really well for the 49ers at either guard position. But I digress. You don't have Ezra Cleveland if you're the Vikings. Ed Ingram is your right guard. You're really good at left tackle with Christian Darrisaw. Brian O'Neill's all right at right tackle. The left and right guard, the interior line positions, those are the worry points for the Minnesota Vikings. And those are the points where I think the 49ers can really capitalize now that they have Javon Hargrave. A year ago, we wouldn't be having this discussion. A year ago, the 49ers were weak up the middle. Eric Armstead was hurt. Hargrave wasn't on the team. Javon Kinlaw was hurt too. Kinlaw can at least give the 49ers some rotational depth this year. A year ago, the 49ers were anemic along the interior defensive line. Now they're not. Now I think they're ready to pounce on this developing situation for Minnesota along the offensive line. So anyway, back to Cousins. If he doesn't have that run game supporting him, he's in tougher down and distance. He's in tougher second down and third down situations. He might get that filler yardage, but he's not converting series, moving the chains as much as Minnesota needs him to right now. And that's why that offense is down at number 16 in efficiency. What else do we have here? Let's see. Oh, this is a good little zoom out situation right here. Week 7 playoff probability leverage based on 10,000 simulations of the rest of the season. The 49ers have, if they lose, they'll have a 96.5% chance to make the playoffs. If they win, it will be a 98.9% chance. So this is not the most important game in the world that the 49ers are playing, although I do think it has some significance that transcends some of these numbers, and we can explain that in a little bit. But as you can tell, there's not going to be a wild swing for the 49ers. It goes from 96.5% with a loss to 98.9% with a win. Meanwhile, for the Vikings, yeah, this is a big game. If they lose, they have a 16.9% chance of making the playoffs. If they win, it's up to 30.5%. So that's nearly 2x for Minnesota. Bigger swing for some of these mediocre teams. Look at the Falcons from 30 to 51%. These top teams, though, they're essentially locked in for better or for worse. So obviously, there's going to be a little bit of variation between the different top teams. Detroit needs looks like they need this win coming up a little bit more. They're playing the Ravens. It's going to be a fun game to watch, but just a good way to illustrate where the 49ers are. Now, I do believe that those numbers may not tell the full story in terms of the flow of the whole 49ers season. Numbers are numbers, but you got to look at the human aspect of things too. And the 49ers are coming off their first loss. They don't really remember what it's like to lose, right? And then have to play the next week because you got to go all the way back to the Kansas City game last October for the most recent example prior to this one of that. They also have a bye week coming up next week, and they also have a short week against Cincinnati right after this game. Quick turnaround, fly back, play the Bengals. Next Sunday can be treacherous against the Bengals. Then there's the bye week. So if you lose this, if you get upset at Minnesota, then have to play a short week against Cincinnati, and then have the bye week, this could go south really quickly if you're not dotting your I's and crossing your T's if you're the 49ers. So the playoff probability leverage tells us one thing, and it's great. Like I respect this, and this, I'm a big perspective guy. I think this tells us a lot about perspective and where the 49ers are at the top of the league. That tells us one thing, but the human aspect of the next 3 weeks, including the bye week, tell us that this is important territory for the 49ers for sure. So that's just something to keep in mind. All right. So you probably were wondering why I showed Kezar. I just wanted to show you the site of one of the most famous games in 49ers Vikings history. The Jim Marshall wrong way run. I talked about this from Kezar yesterday. So just in case you were asleep at the switch yesterday morning, I did a big live. I was walking through San Francisco. I even rode Muni. I mean, the live literally took us onto a subway train going through Buena Vista Park and the tunnel underneath it. And I got off and I walked over to Kezar, which is where the 49ers used to play. And in 1964, Vikings defensive lineman Jim Marshall picked up a fumble from the 49ers and ran the wrong way. And he scored a safety instead of a touchdown. And that happened on this field, on this end zone that I'm circling right now. See some runners having a good time at the track. Well, the touchdown, which wasn't a touchdown, it was a safety for Jim Marshall, happened on this end zone. 49ers Vikings history. I'm going to dip further into 49ers Vikings history a little bit later today, maybe with a Steve Young moment. I'm sure you can all guess what it was. If you can go ahead and type it into the comments section. We looked at the QB stuff. We looked at the luck meter. Here's this. This is from Weather Applied Metrics. I showed this to Jake Moody this week. And he didn't know about this particular data, and his point to me, and he was interested in it. This is Weather Applied Metrics looked at how his kick moved based on the spin and based on the wind against Cleveland. So the initial trajectory was this black oval. His initial kick trajectory based on the angle of his foot hitting the football was just 0.44 yards off center. But then the spin caused it to move an extra 0.82 yards off center, so to the blue. And then the wind in Cleveland got a hold of it and caused it to move a full 2.39 yards, which made it miss, obviously, very barely to the right. The issue with the wind readings are they're very easy to get after the fact, but this information is not available in real time on the sideline. So this is where experience can come in for somebody like Jake Moody. And that was his first time kicking in Cleveland. So just some food for thought. I don't think that nerves or anything played a part. I do actually think that it was just a little lack of experience. And as you can see, one more time here, that wind might have pushed the kick right outside of the upright. Let's look at today's NFL slate, because this is starting in a few minutes. I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to just chilling, watching some football today. So I just pulled it up on Google so we can see. We all already saw Jacksonville beat the Saints. So we're going to have Atlanta and Tampa Bay in the early window. Am I intrigued by that game? No, not at all. I'm not intrigued by that game. The Raiders and the Bears, which is going to be an all-time bad quarterback matchup. It's going to be, who's even starting for the Bears? It's Brian Hoyer for the Raiders, and the Bears don't have Justin Fields. So, no, I'm not intrigued by that game. Cleveland and Indianapolis. I am intrigued. I'm excited to watch this Cleveland defense the rest of the season now that I've seen them in person. The Cleveland Browns defense has been historically good. By that, I mean they've given up 1,002 yards through 6 games. That is the third fewest out of any team since 1970. The 71 Dolphins are one of the teams that's ahead of the 2023 Cleveland Browns. Third, there have been like 1,500 teams since 1970. That is rarefied air for Cleveland. So I'm excited to see him play against the Indianapolis Colts. No more Anthony Richardson for the Colts, but we'll see how the Browns do and take the show on the road. Remember, this could be, you talk about letdown games. They had an emotional high against the 49ers last week. They're coming off of a pregame fight against the 49ers last week. Well, now the Cleveland Browns go on the road to Indianapolis. So let's watch that game starting in about 8 minutes. Washington against the New York Giants. Two teams the 49ers face off against this year. Washington is going to be on New Year's Eve. Does that game intrigue me? No, I can't lie, not really. This one right here does, though. Detroit and Baltimore. I am still trying to figure out if Detroit has successfully established a bar in San Francisco. If you know of the Detroit bar, I think they were trying to do something over here at the old Giordano Brothers based on the Week 1 crowd there. But it's time that the Lions had a bar in San Francisco. I know they've been terrible for years. There hasn't been much interest there. Maybe the Michigan bar can become like the University of Michigan bar. The college bar can become the Detroit bar. Whatever it is, we need the Lions to have a bar because the Ravens have a bar. I'm going to try to stop by the Ravens bar today, get some footage there. Just give you the show here in San Francisco. But Lions Ravens is going to be a good football game. Detroit and San Francisco, the 49ers obviously, are the only two teams in the NFL who are ranked top 5 in efficiency right now in both offense and defense. Obviously, Baltimore is a good team as well. This is on the road in Baltimore. Jared Goff, this Detroit Lion, Dan Campbell, this Detroit Lions outfit that's 5-1 that I think is in a race with the 49ers for that number 1 seed. The Eagles are obviously part of that too. These guys, they get to duke it out against the Baltimore Ravens. I am really looking forward to watching that game. So I'll swing by. Maybe I could swing by the Colts and the Browns. They both have bars in San Francisco too. Maybe swing by for portions of the of that game by the Browns bar, and then I want to see the Ravens and the Lions at the Ravens bar. If the Lions have a bar, go there, and then maybe finish up the 1 p.m. or the 10 a.m. window of games in North Beach for the Bills and the Patriots, because the Bills have a nice bar in North Beach that's called North Star actually. Now the Patriots aren't good, so I think the Bills will crush them, but it's on the road and maybe there'll be some desperation from the Patriots to salvage something, but hasn't been a good football team. In the afternoon window, you got an NFC West matchup: Seattle against Arizona. Does that intrigue me? Not really. Arizona is who Arizona is. I think Seattle is who Seattle is. I think that we're all very familiar with those teams. I think that Seattle's good but not great, and I think that Arizona, well, it's a rough year for Arizona. They could make a dent in this. They have made dents against Seattle in the past, and I'm sure the 49ers would appreciate if there were an upset here. Pittsburgh against the Rams, also interesting because I think the Rams are playing a little bit better than a lot of people thought in the NFC West. So maybe we take a look at Pittsburgh and the Rams, and then we could take a look at Chargers and Chiefs, Herbert against Mahomes, followed by Packers and Broncos. And boy, the Broncos are borderline unwatchable this year. Finally, the grand finale, Dolphins and Eagles. Last week, Robert Saleh helped the 49ers out by beating Philadelphia with his New York Jets. Now, former Shanahan Lieutenant Mike McDaniel can help the 49ers out by beating the Philadelphia Eagles with his Miami Dolphins. So it's going to be a really fun slate today. 49ers and Vikings tomorrow. I'm not going to fly out till 6:30 a.m. out of SFO to Minneapolis. So make it there by noon, 7 hours plus ahead of game time. I'll be chilling in Minneapolis tomorrow. Cannot wait to see that building. Maybe I picked the very best question that I see before these 10 a.m. games start. Trent Williams is doubtful. Everybody seems to be talking about that. I covered that early in the show. We're going to call this 49ers Intel the day before. We've got 2 or 3 minutes. This is correct. Herbert and Mahomes have not looked that good. It's important to have QB perspective around the league. Really important. Hope everybody enjoys the games as well. Greenlaw is questionable, but I think that he will play. I'm not expecting Trent Williams to play. Neither are the 49ers since he is doubtful. Hopefully you guys enjoyed all the data that I presented on the show today. Hopefully that sets the table for you enjoying today's games. Here's a good point. First half of the season, much different than the second half. Teams either evolve up or down, never stay the same. Dan sees the 49ers defense getting better. I do too. They're top 5 right now, but I think this defense is top 2 potential. I don't want to say top one potential because Cleveland's earned that right now. Cleveland is far and away right now the best defense in the league. Maybe the 49ers can close some ground, but let's give Cleveland the respect that they deserve. I 100% disagree on this airport take. SFO is constantly rated as one of the best airports in the U.S. I would even venture to say it might be the best big airport in the United States. The food is awesome. It's easy to reach. You can take the train there. You can get to anywhere. It's got essentially all the flights that LAX, which is much larger in terms of passenger load, has. I think you say you're recommending San Jose. You can't. I mean, it's apples and oranges. You can't get the same flights out of San Jose as San Francisco. So I fly SFO. I'm not going to go all the way down to San Jose just to have worse flight options. I'll fly out of San Jose if I'm down in Santa Clara, but I have to stand up for SFO in this situation. I think it's a really good airport. No, Christian McCaffrey is not lit out for the game. I think Christian McCaffrey is going to play. He's officially questionable. And we can all agree that LAX is trash. One of the worst airports in the world. And that's a good finishing note. Everybody enjoy the games this Sunday.